Okay, looks like most participants are here, so thank you for joining us today. My name is Maria Pieri. I'm the BSME Head of Education and also the Editorial Director for National Geographic Traveller UK and also the food magazine that we do. So I'm really happy and delighted to welcome you today to the How to Kickstart Your Career webinar in association with Readly. We're really looking forward to an energetic and lively chat. We've got lots of really interesting panelists with us today. So very quick introduction, then I'm going to get straight into it. So first and foremost, I'm going to literally just go around my screen, which I know will be different for everyone. So you'll have to jump across with your eyes. Gaby Huddart, the editorial director for Hearst Lifestyle and editor-in-chief of Good Housekeeping, who's just waved. And then I've got Tim Pollard, digital editorial director for Bauer Automotive and Specialist. Jamie Lafferty, freelance journalist and photographer. Jessica Evans, freelance journalist and lecturer. And Luke Barr, senior reporter at The Lawyer. So thank you everyone for joining me today on this panel. It's the first of our kind of hopefully annual series of webinars that are focusing on this subject to help people just sort of get into the industry and think about how they might kickstart that career, which can always feel like a really daunting step when you're just about to leave college, or even if you're in the first starter job and you're looking for that first step. So how am I going to kick it off? What to do first? Let's talk to Gaby first, if that's okay. What kind of research would you suggest that people do, and how should they sort of approach that first step going into the industry?
I mean, my mantra is no research is too much research. I think obviously you might have your dream job laid out in your head of where you want to end up. But, you know, you probably got to be realistic that there are lots of steps before you get there. And I think broadly about anything that could help you get there. When I started out, I wanted to be a travel journalist, actually, Maria. And I started by working on local papers, doing any shift that I could get. And my first proper job was as sub-editor on Computer Weekly. I wasn't remotely interested in computers. I wasn't remotely interested really long-term in sub-editing, but any job will get you in. But when you get those interviews, when you get those first opportunities, just research the hell out of any potential employer and any potential title that you want to work for. I'd say, you know, really you want to be the best informed person in any room or any discussion about a title you're interested in working on, and regard it as a journalistic a mission, really. You know, one of the things that we all do is investigate and research as part of our jobs, and this is your first opportunity to prove that. It's very easy now to find information, everything's there. And one of the things that I will always do in any interview is ask people what they know about our business. It's surprising how many people don't know very much or haven't done the research, and you just got to literally research the hell out of it. I don't know whether anybody else would hopefully agree with that, but I just think, you know, really be the best informed person you can be and go broad.
I would just say that's obviously for a specific company, but where do you first start looking for jobs? Who would like to tackle that? Luke, do you want to jump in on that one? Where would you start looking? Where did you start looking for your job when you were first looking?
So I was actually quite lucky. So I did a master's at Goldsmiths. So the job at The Lawyer actually came from an email through Goldsmiths. But before that, I mean, it's kind of all of the usual avenues. I mean, you want to kind of set up as many alerts as you can on LinkedIn. I mean, you can kind of set them up at the moment and you get lots of come through that. And then there's emails such as Journal Resources. I don't know if anyone's kind of signed up to that. That's a weekly email. And there's also another email notification you can get about freelance jobs. So I think it's trying to kind of use the resources that are out there, whether that be LinkedIn, Twitter. And also, I mean, I suppose it's kind of a bit of an obvious one, but I also think you should just email. I did a 2 weeks work experience at the Sunday Times a few years ago, just by emailing one of the editors. So I think sometimes just sending an email to someone can also go quite a far way, to be honest.
Okay, fantastic. And I'm going to ask Jamie actually randomly. CV, how do you put together your CV? I can just imagine your CV. I've worked closely with Jamie, so that's why I'm asking that.
Well, I mean, my CV is, I try to keep it sort of light and entertaining, I guess, and try not to, because I'm a travel writer mostly. And if you actually wrote out a lot of the things that I've done, I would sound so obnoxious that I would never give me a job. So you have to sort of make yourself sound like, that you have some skill apart from just all your experience as well. But I mean, I guess because I'm freelance, in a strange way, I don't really keep my CV that up to date. It's been a few years since I applied for a staff job. So I think that it's hard to say, really. I mean, kind of when you're freelance, you're almost applying for a job every single time when you send a pitch. But my actual CV probably desperately needs updated now that you mention it, because I haven't looked at it for a while. Because you're always constantly debating when you're freelance, would I be better off in a staff job? And up until about 2 years ago, I really wasn't sure. And now I'm pretty well settled into being freelance.
Okay, thank you. And Tim, in terms of like how you, there's two things here I'm thinking. Number one, like how important do you think that CV is for, taking that first step, and what to do first when you look for a job? But also, what about the social media profile that goes surrounding it as well?
Good question. So it's really interesting hearing this conversation, because I remember being in the shoes. I guess a lot of the audience will be in right now. It doesn't seem that long ago that I left uni and was looking to get my foot in the door. And actually, like Gaby, weirdly, I kind of had a bit of a. It's weird looking back now after 2 decades. I've hopped around. I think the idea of a job for life, it just doesn't exist. And I started on local papers. Started writing about topics I really didn't want to, but quite quickly managed to get to where I wanted, writing about cars, which was my, what I was really obsessed about. So, but how do you make your CV stand out was your question. So when we advertise for jobs on car magazines, say, it depends on the job, but when we've done, if we're advertising for a road tester, we can get literally hundreds of people applying. So that's where the CV comes in. I think, and there are two parts to my answer. One is, I'm actually not really that interested in what results you've got at A level and things. Yeah, it's nice to know and, be truthful on your CV. What I'm looking for is a bit of a spark, really, and it's about that knowledge and passion for the subject matter. One of the great things about journalism, magazine journalism, is that, your background really doesn't matter. I don't care where you went to university. I don't care if you went to university, really. It's about being able, in that CV and that covering letter, or whatever we've asked, in the application form, just to stand out. This is really predominantly still a job that involves writing. So the ability to grab my attention and maybe think, cool, this candidate's got something about them. It's so important. I know nowadays, we've obviously, it's not just writing, it's about video, it could be about podcasting. There's so many strands to what we do, but you've got to stand out. We want that on the page from our journalists when they're writing and creating content. And the same applies really in that application. So think, what can you do to make your covering letter just sort of sizzle a little bit and stand out from the others? That's the crucial thing for me. But to reassure people, to be perfectly honest, I can't tell you if most of my staff have degrees or what have you. It's not really that important for me. And I think that's really important about journalism, that we, talent should rise. It should be a meritocracy. And I think that's really important as well. Have I answered your second question?
You have. No, I'll come back to the second one, actually. And then I think maybe I'll get Jess to do that one, because obviously, working in the field that you're working in, the social media profile is probably really quite important, and being able to access, people will look, and I'm sure we as employers probably do look at people's social media profile, even if it's on LinkedIn, but possibly on Twitter. So what do you recommend, or what do you advise people when they're applying for jobs, getting that CV together, putting that cover letter? Then, what do you say to people on that social media side of stuff?
Yeah, it's really interesting with social media, because obviously we all know by now, it can be a great tool for our careers, and we know the power of it. But I also think it's really important to understand and get that, okay, while you're maybe channeling all your energy into kind of your social media profile and your brand, that sort of thing, I think some of the best journalists I know, some of the greatest editors I know, aren't really even that present on social media. They're too busy actually doing it and kind of making it happen. And I think what I'm trying to say is it's knowing that line between, yes, investing in your social media profile and putting your work up and making sure it kind of acts as a bit of an online portfolio, especially on Twitter. But I think it's really just as important to make sure you're investing and using all of that energy into your pitching. For example, I'm a freelance journalist, and I think one of the things that I wish I got told at uni was that you can pitch now. It's not a thing that you have to wait until you've graduated. It's not a thing you have to kind of wait for. You can do it now. So I think social media is important, and it's great. It's a great tool. But I think sometimes just actually meeting people and getting out there and kind of closing the tabs on Twitter is sometimes the best thing that you can do.
Isn't it, Maria? Just very quickly, Maria, I was quite struck by, I remember, I'm so old, but I remember sort of writing, typing out letters and posting them off to people when I was at school asking for advice. And now, crikey, you can approach anyone. We're probably all on social media, and, the fact that people can tag us and contact us beforehand, that reach and accessibility is amazing, isn't it?
That's what I was going to then pick up on, actually. I was going to say, would you recommend things like LinkedIn? Because at least it's in the right kind of frame to contact people, because that you're in that work environment, rather than Twitter, or does it not matter? And has anyone got experience of that? Have they been contacted by someone via social media that then has got a job, and which medium did they use?
I think I'd agree with Luke, actually. The most direct ones are emails straight into somebody's inbox. I mean, so social media is great. Couple of points, just to agree with Tim, is passion. That word passion that you mentioned is absolutely the thing that, whether it's any verbal communication, an email, in a CV, it's absolute passion for the subject. Second point on social media, I would just be, whether you're using it as a tool for work, I would just be very, very, very aware. I'm constantly saying it to my daughters, that if you're on public social media, people will look at that to get an impression of you as an individual, even if you're not using it professionally. So just be really careful with what you put up, because it will say things about you. And so just when you're going into the professional world, just be a bit careful with what you post, and be aware that future employers will be looking at it, and they will look at it, and it will in an instant say something about you, and just really, really be careful. Do you find it useful for networking though? Although I'd actually agree with Jess, it's not the be all and end all. It's a nice thing to do on the side. If you're serious about something and serious about a publication or a job or getting in touch with someone, email, direct into the box, and in that first sentence, why the hell should I carry on reading this email? And I commissioned people on the basis with absolutely, and actually a student on something, because they hit me with something so brilliant in the first sentence of their email. And I've also employed somebody from a really brilliant email, where they showed me spark and passion and all those things that Tim was talking about. So I think I'd agree. I think, with Luke, if you really want something, just go after it. And actually, don't worry if you're being annoying. Just, keep emailing somebody. Don't worry about, that, again, it's part of the job. Tenacity absolutely is one of the most important skills as a journalist. And, you've really got to go for it, because other people will be. So, it's tough. It's not easy, and you've got to fight for every commission. You have to have a thick skin, absolutely. Yeah, you do have to have a thick skin. Okay, that's great. I think that's really good stuff for like how to first take that first step. I'm going to move it on to a topic that I think we could probably spend a whole hour on, but we'll try and limit it to like the amount of time we've got, which is internships, which kind of people, paid or not paid, should they pay? Do we expect people to see loads of internships on CVs? Would we only hire people who have done those internships? So there's so many questions around that. But I think just to tackle it directly to say Tim and Gaby, who were probably, and Luke, in fact, all of you, but Tim and Gaby to start, just to say, what's your opinion of when you see a candidate who's done millions of internships and somebody who's just done like one or two? How important do you think it is to make sure that you have that internship under your belt?
I guess we need to define internship a little bit. I think I guess I remember doing work experience, taking a week off, did a little bit at school. And I kind of want to see if if the audience here is like most of the people wanting to break into it, I think it's so important that you get some experience. Now, whether that's ideally on a professional title, so it is a week's holiday from college or school, or even if you've left education, getting something under your belt, a short period, is so important. When we're talking about making the CV or the application stand out, for me, somebody who's got off their bum and done something about it. Now, it could be ideally, some professional experience, a week in an office. It just counts for so much. Now, that's been quite challenged in the last 18 months with a lot of, us still working at home, looking around the call. I think most people are. I happen to be on a rare day in the office, so I'm still mostly at home. But the other thing I'm looking out for is people who just, it doesn't matter if you've been on a school magazine or college, uni newspaper or magazine. I think some evidence that you really want this and you've had a bit of, you've had a taste of it. It's so important. Our work experience has been quite challenged in the last 18 months. We've essentially paused. It's very much pausing, not stopping our kind of programs. We've just not been in the office. And I think with all the trials and tribulations of home working, it's not something but we're just about to kind of restart again. I think with safety in mind, we think we can do that. And the other thing, I don't know if you want me to talk about this now, but we do have proper internships now, and I'm so pleased that now we're being paid. Bauer's got a scheme with the Kickstart government scheme where people are getting paid. I think that's so important. We talked about accessibility earlier. The idea that people should work for free for extended periods of time, I'm not into that. I don't think that's right or fair. I think a week's work experience, which is what I did, I still think that's fine. I think that's acceptable, isn't it? Taking a week off as holiday from school or whatever, I think that's fine. I think any longer than that, you start to take the mickey a little bit. It doesn't feel right. So I'm glad to see that, some of the bigger publishers are doing that, and that's really good. I think at Bauer, just one final word on that. I think we've, it is government assisted. So I'm not saying that this is Bauer being amazing and most of the money and fundings come from the government. But I believe in 2021, we will have had 100 people through the door on our Kickstart program, which is fantastic. And that's aimed at people 16 to 24, getting them through the doors. And they've worked on most of our titles, really. Empire magazine, Car magazine, we've had people there as well. Some of the radio stations at Bauer, but that just gives you an idea. These options are out there, so look into it, go and research it a little bit, because I'm sure a lot of the big publishers have it.
Okay, fantastic, thank you. Luke, you're nodding your head, so I'm going to come to you. Did you do internships before taking on the role that you're in?
So I didn't do any internships, but I had a few work experience since. So I did a bit of the Liverpool Echo, Camden New Journal, and the Sunday Times. But I think, as what Tim said, I'd never been in a newsroom before that. I'd barely been in an office environment. So I think actually, obviously you do these kind of experience stints and there's the pipe dream of being offered a job at the end of it. But when I look back now, even just the principle of being in the office, seeing the journalists, seeing people, just how it all works is so valuable. And it also kind of removes the fear of what these places are. Having actually seen it up close and personal, being in there is so important. But yeah, I do kind of agree with Tim in terms of the unpaid internships. Occasionally you do see CVs and there's just lists of unpaid internships. So at the end of the day, I don't necessarily agree with them, but I think a few weeks of work experience is so useful, and people will help. Back to the point about emails, people are willing to help you. At the end of the day, you're offering your unpaid work, so people will snap your hand off for that. Really.
Fantastic, thank you. And Gaby, what's your...
Our situation at Hearst actually sounds very similar to what Tim was talking about at Bauer, actually. So we, during the pandemic, we haven't had so much unpaid work experience. Again, we'd have a limit on that. We'd only offer a maximum of a month, and we pay travel expenses when we do that. But we wouldn't keep anyone longer than that. But it has sort of fallen by the wayside during the pandemic. So that's probably quite tough to find now. We do, though, have various internships we offer. So on my team at the moment, and on quite a lot of the teams at Hearst, we do have paid interns. I can't remember off the top of my head the salary, but it's not bad. It's about 20,000 for a year, and it is a year contract as an intern. And we have one in our beauty department, and that person will learn a heck of a lot in that year. And then we have one in our features team as a features intern. And I mean, within a month, she's writing features. Again, she's learning a huge amount. We are never allowed to keep an intern for longer than a year. So those are roles that will come up annually. And I looked on our the Hearst website earlier, and there are various internships on other teams at the moment. So there's quite a lot of those available. So you just, if you're interested in those, you have to keep a look on the Bauer website, the Hearst website. All the magazine publishers will have similar internships coming up all the time. Similar to Bauer, we've also just taken on, and I've now got somebody on our web team through the Kickstart program, which is brilliant because it is to help people who've been long-term unemployed into roles. So it's part funded by the government and then part funded as an employer. And it's really helping to get more diversity into our team, which is brilliant. And so we've got a guy on the digital team at the moment. Again, he's learning a huge amount. It is a finite amount of time that he'll be with us because, these programs have to keep allowing new talent in. But there's a lot of opportunity through a number of different routes. Just to reiterate what Tim and Luke have said, you don't want to just page after page after page of somebody having done free work experience. There's something wrong in that case. Out of every work experience, you need to walk away with a brilliant idea and then be selling them a commission back as a freelancer. You need to be coming up, learning from that experience is to give you the knowledge to get into this as a career. And, you've got contacts through that. You've got contacts who can commission you or will give you advice to go on somewhere else. So don't go from one work experience gig to another one because it's not fair on whoever's supporting you apart from anything else. And there is still work out there. So
thank you. That's great. And Jamie or Jess, who wants to jump in from your perspective? Obviously this is almost like kind of alien, I suppose, in some respects, the internship side of stuff. But have either of you done internships, or what experience would you say is relevant here?
Do you want to go, Jess, or shall I?
Go for it.
I walked a very narrow line of nepotism and good luck to get started. Nepotism is an absolutely wonderful way to get ahead. If you know somebody that's already in the media, talk to them first. My first ever job was working at McDonald's, actual McDonald's. And a few years later, I wrote about a friend of mine who was doing, who'd done unbelievably well in the World Series of Poker. And I just gave the story to my local paper just because I thought it might be nice to see my pals. I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. I just graduated. I had nothing but golf planned for the summer. No idea. And I remembered that one of the guys from McDonald's, his dad was in the papers somehow. And what happened was that the tabloids came for that story that was in the local press, and they picked it up. And then one of them, the biggest selling one in the country, rhymes with Hun and starts with S. They came and said, "Would you like a job?" And I was like, what? Like, why? I've written this one thing. I kind of copied the format from a local paper, and now you're offering me a job. And I was like panicking. So I remembered one of the guys at McDonald's, his dad was in the papers. I got in touch with him and said, "What's going to happen?" And he said, "You're going to be eaten alive." So ahead of that happening, why don't you come into our office and I'll show you around? And he happened to be the editor of the Sunday Herald, and I had no idea. I just thought maybe when Greg said his dad was in papers, I thought maybe he delivered them. I had no idea, and I ended up just going in there. And by pure chance, their sort of junior researcher had just left for a job at the BBC. So he said, "There's 3 days a week here. Would you like that?" And I said yes. And then the other paper said I did 4 days with them, all paid. None of it was interning. And then they said, "We would also like you to come in for 3 days a week, but I absolutely did not want to work for that title and still don't. And so I juggled 2 days a week as a cleaner at a psychiatric hospital, actually like cleaning toilets in a psychiatric hospital rather than work for them, and 3 days a week at the Sunday Herald. And so I learned a lot about toilets.
I was going to say cleaning, probably.
Yeah. But I was really, really fortunate that the guys at the Sunday Herald, I got on the arts and culture desk there, and I spent 2 years there, and I learned more there than I have done anywhere since, and I was really lucky that those people, well, I was lucky, first of all, that my friend's dad happened to have a job in the papers, but I was also lucky that the people at the Sunday Herald took time out their days to educate me and teach me how to write features, to write news features, to do interviews, to go to the pub at lunchtime, all of that stuff. Like, it was great. And without them, I actually don't know what else would have come later, but evidently I had some aptitude for it. I mean, I fell into it after that, but that initial phase, if my friend hadn't been so lucky at poker, if I hadn't got the job at McDonald's, I maybe would not be sitting here just now.
Well, I've made a note to say, work your contacts. that lovely anecdote. So thank you for that. I'm going to move us straight on to recruitment, because I think that's an important thing to tackle when we're talking about kickstarting the career. Like, how do you guys go about recruitment? People in the big companies, recruitment, and also from the other side of it. So, Tim, recruitment, how does it work?
So Bauer's recently, when I say recently, probably in the last 2 years, overhauled its recruitment policy. And it won't surprise you to hear that's kind of in the name of fairness, really, but also diversity. I think it's a big buzzword on the lips of all major companies everywhere in the UK, but particularly in publishing. Gaby, you mentioned the benefits of some of the internship schemes, but to our sort of diversity, the qualities of it in our company. We need to, magazines, when they're thriving, should be talking to and staffed by and created by, teams that represent modern Britain. And I think we all recognise there's a job to be done in magazines. So that's why we overhauled our systems. It's about broadening the reach of who our adverts get in front of, and hopefully getting more applications from across modern Britain. So we now have it was a bit lax before, if I'm honest. Bauer's the UK's biggest magazine publisher, and it was amazing how every magazine did it a slightly different way, and adverts would appear differently. So now we have to follow a set process. The adverts, every single job is advertised on Bauer's own website, but also across various other kind of the third-party ones who aggregate adverts. But all of them go up on Bauer's own site. So as I think somebody mentioned earlier on, if you're looking for a job on a magazine, I would go and find all the major publishers and just bookmark them or set up alerts so you're following what's there. We now have quite strict sort of interviewing processes as well. We'll have to go through 2 rounds with different people. I think we're sort of constantly improving this. I think the next step, I don't think it's quite happened yet, is that we're going to have sort of blind, there'll be sort of redacted names and ages and things like that as well. So you just see the hard, the sort of the bulk of the words on the letters and what have you as well. So I think it's really good. I think it's great. We have a more consistent process. Every job is advertised. The days of, I think what Jamie said, if you know someone in the media, absolutely get in touch. And that will still exist, word of mouth, hearing where the jobs are. But I think also a degree of scrutiny and fairness is great that that's happening. So yeah, a lot of work on it at the moment. How about you, Gaby? What's happening over at Hearst?
It's remarkably similar, Tim. So it is, I'd still say, back to the old, because we're telling everybody on this call to sort of email what they want to do. Any email, I will then forward to the HR department if I think it's good. And I'll say, I think this person, is worth seeing, or put them on the books for, when a role comes up. So I still think the email thing is worth doing. But HR now handle all recruitment centrally. So for every role, people won't apply for a specific role to me direct. It will come through HR. They'll pre-screen. Again, it's 2 people, a minimum of 2 people interviewing for every job. We ask every single candidate the same questions. So we have to put basically a questionnaire together, effectively, of questions before interviews, so that every single candidate for a job, for a role, is asked the same questions. And then we have taken it that step further. So any test that we'll ask to be done for a role is now blind tested. So I'll get whatever the test is, whether it's a writing test or whether it's an art person for a layout, or whatever the role is, the appropriate test is then given back to me with all the details and names taken off, so that you are scoring blind on somebody's test. And they get, it is, I'd say, it's rigorously fair now. At least 2 rounds of interviews for every role, even junior roles, and involving more people. So, it's a longer process probably than it's ever been, but I do think it's definitely fairer, and it is allowing us to cast the net wider. So a good thing, but still worth dropping those emails, because they will, for sparky people, that will still get you through to the next stage, and I'll forward on to HR, and you will get your interview, you'll get your in.
Thank you. And from a sort of interviewee point of view, Luke, I'm just thinking from a smaller company where, obviously Bauer and Hearst have got more resources and stuff, but how do you guys tackle it from your side?
So we have kind of like the initial interview, and then we, at the lawyer, we have then a trial day. So on the trial day, I mean, it was bloody hard, actually. It was 9 till 5. And you have to write an article and then write a feature whilst interviewing lawyers, which I'd never done before. So I was absolutely terrified. But it was good. And I mean, it was kind of, it's a real test. And I actually did that. I was in Italy at the time, so I did that from there virtually. But usually we have people come into the office. They sit on or in normal circumstances, they sit next to you, so you hear them on the phone. So it's nerve-wracking, but it's a test. I think it's exciting. You kind of get a sense as well as the candidate of what it's like in the office. And it's good. I mean, when you're in there, it's also good to show initiative. You can kind of ask other people for help. You can ask questions. You can kind of just get a feel of what it's like actually being in the office.
Okay, that's great. And Jess, a bit of an odd one, but maybe not. What's your experience of it?
Of tests like that?
No, of the recruitment process.
I'm sorry, I've great no experience.
I feel like I've never had a test like that. That would be horrifying. Well done, Luke, that you passed that. Sounds terrifying.
Yeah, the recruitment. So I actually did a fair bit of interning. So I studied journalism at uni and then went straight to London and just basically interned far too much. Definitely wish I had some of your guys' advice saying calm down, chill out on the internships, and shake it up a little bit. But at the time, that was the advice that I was given: just intern your bum off, basically. So that's what I did. But yeah, and then when it came to the recruitment process, it was mostly for me personally, because I guess I was in and out of so many different types of offices and building relationships like that. I never actually went through, which is a bit mad, but I never have gone through a formal interviewing process. I've gone through an interviewing process where I've been trying to get promoted, and once I've kind of been in a team. But that's totally mad saying that. But so I guess my takeaway from that really would be relationships. It's all about, I think that with most things in life, but particularly in journalism, building those relationships, it really is so crucial. And passion, that word that people have used in this webinar, I was awful when I started, I think, as most people are in the office and haven't got a clue what you're doing. But I was super passionate and I really, really wanted to be there. And I think as an intern, I think if you really want to be there, you do actually stand out, because there's so many interns that come in and they just kind of, they act like they don't really want to be there. But if you're making mistakes, inevitably, but if you're really happy to be there, if you're, chatting to everyone, just really thankful for the opportunity, people, tend to appreciate that a bit more. So I'm sorry I haven't been through the formal interviewing process in that way, but I've definitely, I definitely made those relationships as I was interning, and then jobs thankfully would come up.
Absolutely, and that makes a lot of sense because you're using the network that you've got to at your fingertips, which is the right thing to do. Jamie, I'm going to throw it to you because I think this could be fun. In terms of the going forward for the interview, how do you prep for it? You're obviously a personable person, and I imagine that you've fallen into a couple of jobs here and there. But in terms of the interview, have you ever been nervous about going to an interview? How have you practiced for it?
I was nervous on the train down to the offices for the Sun, for sure. Like I remember being on the train and struggling to stand up a little bit because I was like, oh, I've been told that this guy, like, he was a sort of old, hideous dinosaur from Fleet Street. Like, he's long retired now. Don't worry about it. Yeah,
I was about to say, you're not planning to get another job here, are you?
No. He was one of these guys, like, a really deplorable character, and making up sources and all the sort of weird, horrible gossip you hope doesn't happen in tabloid newsrooms. Absolutely, he was doing all of that. Chain smoker, disgusted, and I knew that that's what I was coming into. And I was 23 years old and had a 500-word thing about my pal from a local paper. That's the experience I had, and nothing else. And I remember thinking, I'm dead, but I'm so dead that actually the pressure's off, because I can play golf on my South Ayrshire Council golf ticket for the rest of the summer and not have to worry about the rest. I can go and, like, I don't know, maybe get a store manager's job somewhere in a department store in Ayr. Like, I don't care about this. It's still scary, but like once I sort of liberated myself from that, then I was able to go in there, not vomit on his desk, and try to, like, just keep a straight face. And especially when he said, would you like to come in? I remember he said, do you want to check your diary and see how it's how you're fixed, and maybe you can come in next week? And I was like, A, I don't have a diary, and B, if I did, it would say golf ? And nothing else. And so that was bad. That was pretty nerve-wracking then. But I think, and this definitely applies to freelancing as well, one of the hardest things to do is to feel confident. And once you do, you kind of become invincible. Or at least if you can believe that you are, that certainly helps. It's really addictive. That's the slight problem. And now I have absolutely no shame or fear of applying for jobs for anyone. And that's, like, in the last 6 months alone, I've written for Outside Magazine for the first time. I've written for the New York Times for the first time. My byline's in the BBC. I'm a regular contributor to National Geographic, to the Sunday Times. And I still love seeing my byline in these magazines. But I will be super casual with all of these editors, because once you're into it, you realize that they're just folk. And especially if you get to a couple of industry events with them and you see them absolutely slaughtered, then you realize, no, they're just people. They're just people, and there's nothing to be afraid of. But of course, when you're starting out, to get to that rarefied position where not that you no longer care, but you're just not scared anymore, that's the trick. And I suppose you need to go through a few failures and embarrassments before you get to that point.
And Jess, in terms of, like, freelancing, do you sometimes feel that every time you're meeting an editor, it's like an interview?
Yeah, I guess so. Thankfully I'm not, like Jamie is saying, I'm not as bad anymore. I think, oh my gosh, like, back to the days where I was an editorial assistant, I just completely adored and admired the editor, but also very, very scared in equal measure. So thankfully it's not that type of experience anymore. But yeah, I think it does feel like it's you're trying to win them over, aren't you, with your idea? So every new editor that you're making a connection with, it does feel like a mini interview process. Hopefully not as intense. But I would say start small when it comes to pitching and freelancing. I think Twitter makes it out like freelancers have got, 20 different editors at their fingertips and they're really close with all of them. But the reality is most freelancers have a smaller network of editors who they genuinely do work with frequently. And the way that they do that is feed in those relationships and really invest in and building those relationships over time. So please don't let Twitter put you off or make you think that you have to kind of have these really close working relationships with 20 odd different or 30 odd different editors, I think it's good just to start small, and to start emailing those editors your ideas, your pitches. And from that place, once you get the commission, treat that relationship as gold, because it really is. That's fantastic that you've got one commission, and instead of kind of moving on to the next place and getting overexcited and being like, right, I've got my byline in that place, so I'm going to move on to somewhere else and get another byline somewhere. I know, I understand the temptation, but actually stick with that editor and really feed that relationship and make sure that relationship's a real substantial one. Because it's no good just having in your Twitter bio, oh, I've got bylines and here, and everywhere, but you actually haven't really got any true solid relationships with the people. You want to get regular work with editors.
Did you hear that, Jamie? He's a regular for us, so
yeah,
it's fine.
I've only had 2 catastrophic fallouts in the last year. I think I'm doing more or less fine. That's not bad for him. No, it's good.
Bad. He's doing all right. Okay, I'm going to move us over to some questions, because I think it's kind of interesting. We're talking about people kickstarting their career, and it's kind of referring to people starting their career. But what happens if you want to change direction? How do you guys perceive people that are changing direction? What kind of almost like bandwidth do you give them? How much time do you give them? And in terms of looking at those CVs, because I can see from some of the questions, people are saying, what one of them is, what can you recommend for someone looking to make a career change? I'm not a graduate, but someone who's got referable skills. Gaby, do you want to pick that one up?
Yeah, I mean, I've just given a commission to somebody who was still on their course, who is in their 50s and is a teacher doing a postgrad journalism course. And she's a reader of the magazine. And she told me in the first sentence why I should give her a chance. And it blew me away, because she knew my magazine inside out. Was really, I mean, I'm loving listening to Jess, because Jess, your enthusiasm, your boundless enthusiasm. I think if people on this webinar look at you and listen to you, you must have been an awesome intern, because you were like, give me more, give me more, give me more. I want to do it. I want to do better. And back to sort of whether you're an intern or whether you're still a student or whatever stage you're at, that enthusiasm, I think, is gold. Because if somebody really wants to write for you, then they will come up with an idea that's appropriate for your title. And essentially, that's what I got from somebody I gave a chance to recently. And oh my God, that article was word perfect when it came in. And I get articles in from people who've been writing for years as journalists who don't polish their work as much. So there's the right idea. It's knowing the title that you're pitching to, and as long as you know that, you really, really figure it out. Good ideas are good ideas, and they will come to the top. They will.
And how do you cope with, how should we say, a non-responsive editor, or more than not a few non-responsive editors? I might chuck that at Jamie, actually. So I'm just thinking, I've got somebody who's asked one of the questions, which is, I've been trying for ages to get hold of editors and they're just not replying. What can they do to try and get that response?
I can tell you a couple of my dirty tricks if you like. One of them brief,
so we get some more questions in.
One of them very quickly is if you really, really want to get a specific editor, a specific title, and I've done this with an editor who I can't name because they also employ me currently, set up an alert for them on Twitter, because if my logic is, if they've got time to tweet, they've got time to reply to one of the 15 emails that you sent them. And so the moment you see them tweet, then you send your follow-up, because they must have an idle second. And that has actually worked a couple of times. I realize that is sort of on the stalker path. But yeah, I think the thing is, some editors are just overwhelmed. Some of them are less competent. Some of them are harassed. Some of them have closed shops. You don't know, and you have to start every time with a new editor. And that's the thing what Jess said about, like, if you've got a good editor, like, there's no need to move on. Like, try and stick with them. Because that really helps. And it can be really sad when they move title or position and then you don't have easy access to them anymore. But, you just have to be careful. It's a fine line between accepting the fact that you're being ignored or you're not being paid and chasing, and, being polite about it because you don't want to risk future work. And then once in a while standing up for yourself. And that is is hard to do. You know, it's hard to know, and it's hard to really follow that through as well. I had a fallout with Outside magazine. They didn't pay me for 6 months after publication. And so a couple of weeks ago, I decided to torch the whole thing online. So that was a use of social media.
I saw that. That was a useful. You were brave there.
but the thing, I like analysed that situation. You know, some people thought it was crazy what I was doing. It's an American title that I wrote for once that I never want to write for again because they don't pay for 6 months. So, you know, that's not like, I am not willing to start interning at the age of 38. So, you know, it was a calculated risk, but that was just got to a point where it was unacceptable for me. And now that is the absolute extreme end of it. But if you're really being messed around with an editor, you can say, you know, you can point out, you know, you did say you were going to get back to me, and it's been weeks now. You know, I've sent a few emails. Could you just let me know one way or the other? Appeal to the human side, you know. It's like if you get kidnapped, they say you should humanize yourself to your kidnapper. Do that with the editors as well.
Thank you. That's great. I'm going to pitch this one straight to Luke, actually. Did you have a niche straight out of uni, and what helped you find your thing?
Weirdly, my niche wasn't writing about the legal market.
That's why I pitched it at you, because it's interesting, because like we all fall into these things. I wasn't into travel, so, you know, and here I'm in travel, so yeah.
So I was actually writing about, I was a football journalist for like 4 years, and I'm a massive football fan, and I hated it. I did it. I would spend my weekends writing about football. I'd finish and then go meet someone, and they'd ask me to go and watch the football the next day in the pub, and I was like, that is the last thing that I want to do. So it actually goes back to a point that we were saying before, that like the passion, that you can build a passion for something. I never thought for one day that I'd be passionate about the legal market or litigation or whatever, but you can get really interested by it, especially when you're talking to people. Like I started doing this job, and I was going out for drinks and lunches and dinners, and people genuinely care about their work. And if you've got a lawyer representing an oligarch who can't stand someone else, then it's going to be quite a juicy conversation, and then they're passionate about it. So you can build a passion for something you wouldn't necessarily expect you would have before. That's what I would say.
Thank you. That's great. So, but, you know, make sure that you build a passion as well. Try new things. I mean, one of the things I suppose that, you know, that I think Gaby picked up on at the beginning was just make sure that you try lots of different stuff as well. Don't just go for what you think is your passion, because you just don't know until you've tried it. And until you've had that kind of experience, it's difficult to then know, perhaps, you know, maybe it's travel, maybe it's food, maybe it's something else. It's not often the obvious. Jess, I'm going to chuck the next one over to you, because people are saying, you know, can I get some advice on pitching? There's quite a few questions here about pitching. So first, Jess, and maybe Jamie, or if Gaby or Tim want to pitch in as well, literally. Excuse the pun. Over to you, Jess.
Yeah, so pitching. So I actually talk an awful lot about this, too much probably, but a lot. I do a thing called the freelance sessions, where basically I help people with their pitches. And it doesn't matter if you're just starting out, if you're at uni, if you're not studying journalism, that's completely fine as well. It's for anyone who just absolutely loves writing and wants to break into journalism and wants to learn how to build those relationships with editors and essentially, bottom line, get their ideas commissioned. So I do talk a lot about this. So what I would say was, with pitching, please don't feel like you have to build it up until you finally pitch to that publication that you love. Save yourself all the time and just go straight to them, so you don't have to think, okay, well, I'm going to kind of pitch and work and write for these lesser known publications before I get to somewhere like The Guardian, for example, or whatever national or international publication is on your wish list. Just if you think you have an idea that you can see in that magazine or you can see in that newspaper, you know, just go straight to them. And what I would say is it is so important of what is in your headline. I think 80% of the time, I think if the headline falls flat on your subject matter, I don't think the editor is going to be that excited to want to open it up. So what I would kind of quick takeaways is I would say make sure that you give your headline as much love as you give your actual idea. I think make sure you don't overlook that, and make sure it's as attention grabbing as possible. Don't worry about it if it's a bit controversial, even better. And make sure that your story has some kind of news hook as well. I think some people have the best ideas, but then they don't attach a news hook onto them. And a lot of the time that's what kind of loses in the commission, because the editor is thinking, what makes this newsworthy? It's a good idea, but it doesn't, what makes it topical? What makes it relevant to now? So I would say make sure that your idea has a killer headline and a great news hook, and also lengthwise, no more than 350 words roundabout for a pitch. You don't want to make it too waffly like I've just been. You want to make sure. That
was great. No, thank you, Jess. I'm going to slightly twist it a little bit and go to Gaby and say, so from your side of stuff, what makes a good pitch?
It's really interesting hearing Jess then. I think really early on, I had a really the culture in magazines is very different now, thank God, to what it was. And it was pretty hardcore when I was starting out. And I had a very tough boss who I learnt loads from, who was like, so what's the story? And then you'd start saying what you thought the story was. It's like, no, shut up. What's the story? And really, really quickly, succinctly, if you can tell somebody in 1 or 2 sentences, this is the story, this is why it's great, you need to also be able to do that. And I think when you're pitching, like really quickly, I get probably somewhere between 400 and 600 emails a day. I will read them all. I will delete them quite quickly. I'll generally reply to pretty much everything, or delete a lot of the PR tosh that comes in. I will try and reply to everybody who emails me, but the people whose idea finally gets through and gets commissioned have told me what the flipping story is right high up. And I started out saying, research, Jess said there about knowing the title. If it's a title you're passionate about, you will know it inside out. But please make sure the idea is right for the title. I really early on, when I moved from subbing to writing, I wrote my first feature. I was so proud of it. I wrote this absolutely fantastic feature and spent ages on it, worked a weekend on it. It was absolutely bloody brilliant. And then handed it into the feature editor. So he said, it's irrelevant to our reader. Just
make sure you know the audience.
And actually, it was such a brilliant lesson to learn early on. I hadn't thought about the reader. I'd done something to please myself. It was a terrible piece of journalism. But really instantly, you've got to learn from those trip ups, every single trip up. And never, ever, ever again have I forgotten who the reader is, or whatever title I've been working on. It's all about the reader. And so, and that's what I'm looking for in an idea that excites me for my audience, is something I know my reader's going to love.
Thank you. And then just tackling these questions. So sorry, they're going to be a bit quick now. In terms of cover letters, how long or short should they be, and what is the best way to present your work? I'm going to go to Tim for that one. So cover letters, how long do you want to see a cover letter be?
Short and snappy. I think it's going to be a letter or it's going to be an email nowadays, but I think, you wouldn't really want more than one page for a covering letter on a job application if it was a physical sheet of A4, and the same would probably go if it was, digital. I think Gaby and several people here, 400 to 600 emails a day. My inbox is pretty bad, but not that bad. Make it short, put it right at the top. It's quality of writing, making whether it's a covering letter, a pitch, whatever it is, we specialise in communicating. We want, don't just cut to the chase, get at the top. It's like news writing, isn't it? The pyramid. What's in your intro or your headline? That's how you hook a reader in. It's the same. Magazine editors are busy people. So short and pithy, but, get some character across, a bit of sizzle, but don't be wordy. We won't be impressed by verbose and overlong comms.
Best way to present work, online portfolio or website or WordPress? Anyone want to comment on that one?
I don't really mind, really. I think it's so long as it's, appropriate.
As long as there's a link that works.
Well, essentially, I'm a digital editorial director, so I guess if there's a link to some videos or podcasts, that's brilliant. To make it appropriate to the medium, I guess, it would be my advice.
Okay, Gaby, a quick one straight back to you in terms of what if somebody wants to get into sub-editing or that side of stuff? I'm presuming that this is
those roles will be advertised in the same way as everything else, and there's quite a lot of them. So I mean, the other way is I know some of the big press associations have a lot of subbing opportunities. So the press association has big teams of subs working on some smaller titles. So press association is probably a good place to get in. I'd say the one thing that absolutely floors me still is when I do get applications and there's a spelling mistake or a grammatical error in. And that's just killed it for me. You just got to, if you want, particularly in subbing, but if you want a job as a writer or a sub on one of my titles, I want an absolutely 100% clean letter and 100% clean CV. So make sure that you have absolutely killed it with those, because one spelling mistake and it's in the no pile. Sorry.
I did that the other day. We were recruiting for a sub-editor and they had 3 S's in possess. And I was like, you can't, not for that role. For any other role, I might have overlooked it, but yeah.
But you can spell check. You can spell check.
Absolutely, you can spell check. Tim, you've got a couple of direct hits for you that they're looking for jobs with you. I think you replied to one. There's another one above, so I'll leave that with you. And I think I will then go over to Jane and say, how can you show your passion in pictures or job applications for niche areas? You're a passionate person, so how would you show your passion on paper?
I mean, I guess example work helps. I mean, it's difficult. Like, for me, I don't really place so much emphasis on passion in my writing because I think it can come across as insincere. So I think that expertise and competence is every bit as, important. When I first wanted to write for The Guardian, I didn't have any experience with any broadsheets at all. I only had I had some magazine features from my time, working on an in-flight magazine in Dubai, where the standards were not super high. And I submitted my, what I thought was a half-decent essay as an example work. And Gemma Bowes was the editor at the time, and she was like, well, your pitch is good, but we don't think your writing's really there yet. And I was somewhere on a Venn diagram between furious and embarrassed and completely crushed. And she did say, though, if you want to go and do the story, then we can take it on spec, but you can't say that you've got full commission for it. And so then I used vengeance as my main motivator to prove her how spectacularly wrong she was. But I didn't know that. I just thought at the time, well, I'll show you that I really want to do this story and I really want to work for you, because I'll take the chance that I might have to actually pay for all this stuff. If I couldn't have got that magazine, if I couldn't have got that paper to publish that article, I'd have been in deep trouble. So I guess that was a way that I was given a chance and then had to rise to the occasion for it, basically. But I mean, after that, then I think it's more about showing that you. Gemma actually gave me a great bit of advice. She said, you can, when we're looking for freelancers, if you can be brilliant, that's lovely, but don't be difficult. Don't waste editors' time. It's much better to be mediocre, but to follow the brief and file on time and file something that doesn't need many changes. If you want to think that you're reinventing, the written word for this 500-word listicle, it's not happening. It's not. Just get it in on time, follow the brief, and don't mess around. And I think that was some of the best advice I've ever had. I don't follow it all the time, but I think it's really solid advice.
That's great. Thank you. That is very true. We're just about to run out of time, so I want to say a big thank you to all of you for partaking in this. It's kind of gone off in a couple of different directions, and it makes me think that we could do a complete webinar just on pitching itself. But I think everybody's experience is really valuable and has given it a different kind of approach to how we've conducted this. So I hope you have enjoyed it as much as I have. Things I've learned, I think I'm just going to run through them really quickly. Be direct, reach out to editors directly. Don't dwell on social media. Good cover letter, always really, really good. Make sure it's short, it's succinct. Research the hell out of things. Thank you, Gabby. Be absolutely passionate. Thank you, Jamie, and all of you. Try any role. Get work experience, but don't get too hung up on internships. Look out for internships across all the different publishers' websites. Work on your contacts and your networking. Feel confident and work out what gives you confidence to be able to step into an interview room. Build a passion, but you don't have to work in the passion. Thank you, Luke. Pitching, good subject line. Make sure that you have a good subject line, a good news hook, and no more than 350 words. Although I still think that's quite long, even for that. So, but go for it. Tell people what you need to know in 1 or 2 sentences. Thank you, Gabby. Agree with that. Work out what the story is. Absolutely. If you're pitching, you need to know that, and make sure you know who you're writing for. Quality of writing, spell check, and ending on this one, you can be brilliant, but you can be brilliant, but don't be mediocre. And yes, follow the brief. So I think in terms of that, just as an ending, follow the brief. I would say that for any job application that you go for, look at what they're asking for and make sure you tailor everything that you do to that brief, which is, in this point, the job itself. Does anyone else want to add anything in that I've missed? I've tried to collate everybody's thoughts. But if I've missed anything, Tim, go for it.
I would like to, my closing comment is it's so worth it. I love magazine journalism. I've been doing it. I was very lucky. I wanted to do it. I had a kind of conversion at age 12. I kind of saw a magazine, a motoring magazine on holiday in Dorset. And I was like, wow, I didn't know there were magazines about cars. I love cars. I love writing. And it's such a good thing. So although it's hard right now, we're coming out of 18 months of really tricky times, but stick at it. If you really want to do it, I'm sure you'll be able to break into it through persistence, through all the stuff, all the tips we've given here. And just, you guys will be switched on, I'm sure. So it's so worth it.
Keep at it, absolutely. Luke, do you have a parting comment for us?
Get on the phone. That's it. Once you're in there, just speak to people, get on the phone. That's my probably main bit of advice.
Fantastic. Thank you. Jamie?
Don't be afraid. It can only go so wrong. But you're not working in an emergency room with people bleeding to death in front of you. It's words on the page. You'll be all right. Just put them in the right order.
Thank you. Jess?
Yeah, I always say with pitching and editorial ideas in general, don't worry about it being perfect, but do worry about it being different. You always want the idea to be different. Thank you.
Gabby, last but not least.
Yeah, similar to Tim, I think, love it. It's the most amazing career, whether I've been freelance for bits as well, and I've got a dream job now. It is the most fantastic career. And I think whoever goes for a job, the person who wants it most always gets it. Freelance or a real job, if you really, really want it, you will get it through your tenacity and through really wanting it.
Thank you. Fantastic, everyone. Once again, thanks for joining me on this panel for How to Kickstart Your Career in association with Readly. So big thanks for all of you for all your words of wisdom. We hope to revisit some of these for next year, some of these topics for next year. So hope some of you may join us again. So thanks again. Take care, guys. Bye.